Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is a food for thought video. I'm not quite sure why it always seems to be me doing all the thinking, so let's get some other thinking caps on. This is Dendrobium stuff. Now, I've had some spare time yesterday afternoon. I've been looking some stuff up, and my Friedrichianum comes into the group that should cool down a lot more than it does for me. Does it need to? Did it get a first on the competition tables? Did it get an RHS certificate for its blooming? So did it need to get that cold? The answer's no. So then I started thinking about the time of year it blooms. It blooms in the summer. You know, it was in full flood in June. What the hell has the winter rest got to do with those blooms? And the practical answer is absolutely nothing. The winter resters that need the rest and the chill down to bloom tend to bloom in late winter, early spring. You can see the direct relationship between what happens to it in the winter and what follows. When a dendrobium blooms in the summer, I can't see what the winter has anything to do with that. Now, there may be some physiology that some sciencey people know that I don't. Well, let's have it then. But in just plant terms, I think there are quite a lot of winter resting type dendrobiums classed in that category that just get that where they come from, not need it. There's a difference. If a plant has evolved to be in a certain area, and that's the area it grows best in, fine. And if that triggers blooms, fine. I'm happy with all that. But if its blooming has nothing to do with what happens in the winter, then that winter period is more likely to be what it gets rather than what it needs, if you see what I mean. Now, what mine get in the winter is what some of them need, and what the others get is not only not what they need, it's not what they want, because quite a lot of my plants get too cold in the winter. The way to keep them alive during that period, not happy, but at least keep them going, is to keep them much, much drier. And then they'll be okay, yeah? But it's just food for thought, really, while we look at a nice dendrobium. And this is not a winter rester. In fact, this thing can bloom any time. It doesn't bloom for long, though. You're lucky to get 12 days out of these spikes, but 14's good, but sometimes as short as 10. That depends on temperatures. But you see what I'm getting at? You know, there's a whole set of dendrobiums that are classed as winter resters. The nobly hybrids are in that category. To get the best blooming on those, they need to cool down and get some flipping bright light in the winter. And because they're not growing at that time, they obviously don't need feeding and watering much. Feeding at all and watering much, sorry, needs to be separate. But you see what I'm getting at here? I mean, the nobly hybrids are probably going to bloom anyway, whatever you flipping do to them, because they've just had that fussiness bred out of them that the nobly species has. The nobly species is one of those that needs to get proper cold. You know, we're looking at down below 10 towards 5 degrees C for that one to really trigger a mass blooming. And it is that chill down and the massive increase in light that triggers those blooms on that plant, but not so much on the hybrids. So yeah, just have a think round the subject. If a dendrobium blooms later in the year, does the winter have any effect on it? It's an open-ended question. I think not, but that's just me. I mean, my Friedrichianum doesn't get chilled down as much as it says it should. Does it bloom okay? Yeah. So I don't think it needs that chill down. It's just what it would get in the wild. Well, mine isn't in the wild. It doesn't have to put up with what might be deemed a bit harsh. So, yeah, just a little bit of thought. Have a go at that lot then. Opinions, thoughts, any science you can throw in, because I don't do too much of that. But, yeah, I think sometimes we might worry a little bit too much. My Jenkinsii is a classic example. Where it comes from, it does cool down a bit in the winter, and it comes from mixed forests in the main, so there would be some evergreen trees and some deciduous trees. So depending on where it was hanging out would depend how much the light increased in the winter, and the rain slow right down. You know, so it would get a form of rest. Yeah, but that's what it would get because of where it grows. What time of year does it bloom? Now. That can bloom a bit earlier, but tends to be late spring into early summer before that one comes out. Yeah. And then you get things like hibiki. I don't think it takes much notice of the flipping seasons, quite honestly. Mine blooms right through the summer into the autumn because the blooms last so long. But, you know, these are opening. Some of these have still got to open, yeah? But it's doing its thing now. So I don't think what happens in the winter has any effect whatsoever on this plant, personally speaking. Yeah. Right, that's all for today. We'll just have a quick look at this as it's now opened nearly all of its buds, including some with aphids on. You see, I brought aphids in on those two brassicas from Burnham's, and they've got around. They're not doing intense damage or anything, but you can see them. They're around, so I'll have to get at them today. All I use for these is a very, very fine rubbing alcohol spray. It kills them straight away. It kills them dead. And because it evaporates so fast, it doesn't really get time to do any damage to the buds. But yeah, they're on that one. They're not on the rest of the blooms. Just there, just on that little bit there. And if you have a look on here, they tend to be on the unopened buds. Now, if they're left there long enough, they will leave marks. But they haven't been there long, and they won't be there much longer. To say they're the easiest thing in the world to kill, but it doesn't pay to ignore them, because they will do some damage. You know, they will bite into the blooms, and then when they open, they'll have little marks on them. The marks tend to be on the sepals, obviously, because that's the casing of the bud. If you think about the shape of this bloom, you know, this top one here, and the one out to the right here, and the one out to the left here, that was what enclosed the two petals and the lip. So those are the bits that'll have the nibbles on. And the sepals do tend to be the smaller part of a bloom, but when you look at a bloom like this, they're very even. The petals and sepals are all roughly the same size, sepals being slightly smaller. And when you get onto this type of Oncidium, it's difficult to work out which bit's which. But if you look, the bud is almost black. Which part is black? So it's this bit up here that enclosed all of this, yeah? And the other little bits are hiding around the back. So if you take away the lip, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're there, they're just hiding. So those two round the back there, yeah, and those 3 up the top are what enclosed the bigger bits. Yeah, so those are the bits that get the damage, those are the bits that get nibbled. Is there any on there? No. They tend to go, in my place, they go for blooms. They don't tend to touch growths or anything like that. There's too many nice blooms to nibble on. There's probably some on here somewhere, odd one or two, because this plant was directly next to one of the brassicas that had the bugs on. Now all the brassica blooms are now cut off and gone, so the source has gone. So all I'm dealing with now is what managed to move, what got off of those brassicas and got onto other plants. There aren't too many of them around. The one I do need to watch, because the brassica was over here for a while, is my Prismatocarpus spike. I don't want that getting messed up because I've never seen the blooms. Yeah, that's a first time bloomer for me. I don't see any on that. We're okay. And as I said, they don't tend to go for the green stuff, not in here, not when there's tasty blooms around anyway. And unfortunately, I'm not sure the pinguiculars actually deal with those. Because although aphids fly, they'd prefer not to. They'd prefer to just settle somewhere and stay there and feed, you know, and breed. They do that quite well. Yeah, so that's just a little sort of chat and a quick look round for today. And as I said, aphids can get in anywhere. They can get in an open window. Even if you grow in the home, they can still come in. You know, you might be out in your garden and see some, oh, those roses look nice. I'll take a couple indoors. Watch it. That's how they get in. But they'll get in through open windows. I mean, my cats even come in with aphids on them sometimes where they've been rummaging in the undergrowth. So, you know, there are ways in with the old aphids, and they breed quickly if you don't get on top of them. So keep your eye out. I say that's over and above the mealybugs and the scale, of course. My scale are virtually eradicated, but they're not gone. I noticed a couple of Telumnias had a few yesterday, so they got an alcohol spray. And I think I'm coming to the time now where I think I might actually do the whole collection with the systemic. Just because it saves the workload more than anything. You know, I'd rather not use the heavy guns, but it's so easy to mix up a batch of that, and on a suitable day when I know I'm going to get, you know, the fans will be on and everything like that, I can go round sort of late morning. I don't even have to get the plants down, not for that sort of treatment. I can just spray them where they are, just give them a good soaking. They'll drip all over the place, and then they'll dry in the fans quite quickly before we go into nightfall. And again, if I did that sort of treatment, I probably would miss some plants out because they don't have bugs, and they've never had bugs. They don't seem to get bugs, so why treat something that's okay? My Orangus have never had bugs, ever, so they don't get sprayed. My Bulbophyllums have never had bugs, so they don't get sprayed. Some of my Cattleyas have never had bugs, so they don't get sprayed, and some have, so they do. So I am selective. Right, I will see you next time. I've got things to do that are not in here today. I've got some computer work to do on my Orchid Society magazine. I've had some stuff come in that, so I need to get started on it. The idea is to do a bit at a time and not get into a panic towards the end when it's due to be published. So I've had a few things sent to me, which I can start setting up. And yeah, that sort of day today, I think. Not too much to do out here. I've got, I'm doing mounts in 2 stages now, when we don't get hot weather, consecutive hot weather. So when we get some duller days, some mounts have got little or no moss, and they should still be done every day really. But the ones that are heavy on the moss, like this is still quite damp from yesterday. So that doesn't need doing again today. Yeah? Even if we get a hot day, it'll use up what it's got there for today, ready for tomorrow. So I tend to go round with the sprayer on days like this and just do those that are bare rooted or have tiny little bits of moss and exposed roots. Just give them a go. It's like this plant up here. It's a mass of aerial roots. That ought to be done every day or it's going to dehydrate. It's mostly the kikis growing on the older canes. That's what's producing the roots. And in its natural environment, these canes would arch over, and those little keikis at the ends of those canes would actually touch the, you know, the litter, leaf litter or whatever it was growing on, and they would take root and form a new plant. That's how it would grow normally. But in here, they're stuck with aerial roots until such time as I take them off and plant them up separately, which I'm thinking about doing. I might actually start a brand new plant. Yeah. Job for today. Right, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.